finally, so we take the water out through the treatment, stage 4 level treatment, and then finally taking it out through our wastewater treatment facility and down to the piece. So over the years, it's been declared as a community water supply area, but never fully designated as a community watershed. Interesting challenges around that. We have this variable water supplies. On the left, you can see a huge drilling fracking operation, and there's our intake house there, highly variable flows. And here we are again, after 1 year of a flood, we're into severe drought that could be really quite consequential. So we want to have to think about the managing on supply and demand, where we have Bearhole Lake Weir as a backup supply, but we've got this wastewater treatment facility that we are now using some of that wastewater. Many challenges in terms of the land uses, from logging through to various forms of oil and gas development, long linear developments that can create real issues for us in terms of sediment transport. All the familiar things that you'll know here in Alberta. Certainly private land development and how do you really engage people. Cattle operations as well. So you can see here, just in terms of looking at the change, the red line showing the shift in the hydrograph, the curve in terms of flows, how that peak now that used basically half of what it was in the first 20 years of recorded information, from about 66 to 96, and that peak is now shifted. So it's a few weeks earlier, and it's quite a bit lower than it used to be, and of course it stabilizes off into the winter months, and we know that we have to really manage for that kind of low-level volume. But just to show you those changes in peaks, and just between 1 year and the next, here we've got the flows comparing last year to this year, and we started to see that slope come down, so we said, time to do something. We've got the UNBC folks involved in some GIS mapping, and they're really characterizing the watershed better. And huge amount of forest, I mean 74%, but what is that forest? It's mountain pine beetle forest, it's deciduous forest, it's a mixed coniferous, and a lot of cleared land, so we have to understand the hydrological functions on this land. Various sizes of drainage basins, from what huge subbasins to very tiny subbasins that may be contributing contaminants, but in terms of overall flow is a very minor contributor in terms of flow. Lots of lakes that still need a level of protection at the top end of the watershed. In the dark colors, you can see those areas of more concentrated lakes and wetlands. This is where I think this helps us talk about where Lars is inviting us to look at what are these various forces that are affecting us in the community, where we're trying to get a handle on in terms of managing how we're going forward with our watershed stewardship. So gas industry health concerns are definitely there. People lobbying for alternative water supply. Sectoral interests are always challenging the community in terms of its needs. Conflict over bulk water sales. But on the other side, there's technological developments that are happening. So we're seeing in Canada, for example, leading on a shift to deep salt water recycling. We're seeing a big shift towards energized fracking and away from using water to using high-pressure gas injection. The reclaimed water use, is there as an option, and certainly various technologies in water conservation and integrated municipal planning are creating opportunities to save water. What are the cultural social factors? Well, we got this transient worker connection in the community, and just what is the level of their commitment to place? I think that was mentioned. How do they see themselves really part of the solution in terms of keeping track of water issues? The young adult disconnect. Where are they really seeing themselves into the future? Or is it just water out of the tap, right? First Nations don't have a lot of traditional use in the area, but we do see trends and issues around economics. Certainly the LNG gas developments and BC Citrusy Dam are going to drive potential energy development. We're in a lull right now because of gas prices, but we have a bit of a lull that we can actually start to do this work on understanding integrated approaches and getting some more baseline research done. Within the communities, uncertainty about supplies, both short-term demands for that water, conflicts at the private Crown land interface that we all hear about, and like I say, weakening cultural connections. So there's real sense of how do we map our way forward without sort of just thinking in terms of one sector. Understanding the watershed, where the risks are, where there's high quality subbasins, where we want to be very much focused on protecting those high quality subbasins where there's very little risk, very little damage to those that are much riskier. So I'm just going to fly you through some of the management challenges. You can just sort of get a sense of the whole combination of flows. You get a real visual: flooding from last year, well sites and sumps. Groundwater is definitely a resource under pressure. There's resources, snow course research that we've done. But getting a picture of this, dealing with the risks of spills that are always there. And we certainly hear about that here in Alberta. Dealing with the major peak flow events and flooding. Certainly looking at the levels of storage and use that's happening. Where is land waste disposal being done? It's just upstream of our intake. You know, what's the level of compliance monitoring with that? Just to give you a sense of the level of like open sumps, for example, and disposal sites within the drainage basin. So compliance monitoring, some is done. It's changed over the years, and definitely a lot more reporting of waste and water use. So understanding where all these groundwater issues are, the mountain pine beetle, definitely there is an issue. Certainly going forward, the strategic goals, we're trying to have the idea of a shared research agenda, more compliance monitoring, demonstration projects, updating our source water protection planning, more outreach in the community and education. Some great partnerships with universities and government. We've got a wonderful connection with UNBC doing hydrometric modeling and partnerships with industry as well on a huge study of the watershed resource. We're actually looking at building a profile of groundwater and how drilling, these are actual well depths, and just what the impact is of well drilling, both from a potential for contaminant sources and pathways, as well as potential depressurization of the aquifers we depend on. Not been looked at, but a very important question. Understanding other communities that depended on groundwater and understanding where those flows and how they are affected. Building a lot of great awareness in the community, engaging folks of all backgrounds, certainly the young ones, it's a lot of fun. Work on restoration work applies more holistic approaches to stewardship. Engaging industry in all kinds of workshops, and we'll get you to do this here. This is one of the kinetic sections of this presentation, maybe. The wiggle, the watershed wiggle. You've got to have the kinetic connections with the kids. They love it, and big kids and politicians, it's really quite fun to do that, to see them get up there. We also developed this watershed atlas, and Margaret has, that I mentioned. You can mention this very cool little tool there that really allows people to get their photos loaded in various categories to bring people's builder connection. So the last few couple comments here, we've got some other types of research on. We just finished a watershed tour. We encourage folks to get up there and perhaps have a look around if they do find themselves in Dawson Creek. And we're really, really happy to keep the connection going, build the research partnerships, and really help us, I think, get a handle on where's the best investment for the dollar. So thank you for that.